And we begin this morning with House Republicans preparing for their new role in the minority, looking for potential common ground with Democrats. Joining me right now in an exclusive interview, someone who will have a leading role in that process, Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She's been elected as the incoming House Republican Conference Chair. That is the #3 leadership position for House Republicans. And Congresswoman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Maria. Great to be with you.
Congratulations to you. Can you walk us through your priorities as you get set for this new role come January?
Sure. Well, there are a number of things that we've got to make sure we're focused on. I think, first of all, we're all living through the tremendous economic boom and economic growth created by the Trump economy, by the deregulation we've seen, by the tax cuts. And we've got to make sure that we do everything necessary to prevent the Democrats from reversing course on that. They've made clear that's what they want to do. We've got to, as Republicans in the House, work with the White House, work with our colleagues in the Senate to make sure that doesn't happen. And we've got to take back the majority in 2020. There's no question that continued progress, both on economic security as well as national security, requires that the Republicans take back the House.
I think it's terrific to see so many more women moving into these leadership positions. But, when I look at the numbers, it's at least 123 women will be in the next Congress. Only 19 are Republicans. Why do you think that is?
Well, we've got to do a better job. There's no question, Maria. We've got to make sure that we are recruiting women candidates, that we're working to get our message out to women and men. But I would just say it's very important for us to recognize that, women make bad policy, too. And Nancy Pelosi, obviously, as the leader of the Democrats, is somebody who's in a position has said that she will try to put in place the kind of legislation we know is bad for the country. If you look at the wave of young Democrats, women, many of them who've come in this freshman class, a lot of them are socialist, and they are proposing the kind of socialist economic policy we know is going to be incredibly damaging if it were ever to take hold in this country. So we need to have diversity, but we also need to make sure we understand that just being a woman doesn't mean that you're going to do the right thing, and we've got to fight for the substance and the policies.
I think this is a really important point that you make. So what is the issue around Nancy Pelosi right now? Just had a conversation on Fox and Friends with my colleagues about what's been going on within the Democratic Party when you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, basically telling moderate Republicans, we're coming for you. We want more progressives. We want socialist practices in terms of economic programs. How are you going to deal with that as a party who's trying to come up with moderate economic proposals? And what do you think happens to the Democratic Party?
Well, it's very interesting to me. The Democrats right now are focused on this so-called Russia collusion, the Russia threat. I think the real Russia threat, Maria, is when you look at the kind of Soviet-style economic policy that the Democrats in particular, some of the freshmen coming in, are advocating. Government-provided jobs for everybody, government-provided housing for everybody, and you see it in the people that are likely to be their presidential candidates as well. So I think the Democrats are going through a very challenging time, and Nancy Pelosi is working very hard to try to become the next speaker, which means that she's got to kowtow in many ways to that wing of her party. That's not good for the country.
So will she be speaker, do you think? Do you think she becomes speaker?
Well, I think she's got a tough task ahead of her here, and we'll see what happens. But she certainly is having to placate some very, very radical and socialist is the accurate word for it, views in her party in an attempt to get the votes to do that. Well, and we all know that's not good for the nation.
Last week on this program, I spoke with Rhode Island Democratic Congressman David Cicilline. He's running for a leadership position in the House. About the Democratic agenda, I asked him about Republican criticism that the platform for House Democrats is about investigations and potential impeachment of Trump and not much else. Watch this.
Democrats ran on a very specific agenda. I helped craft it with my two co-chairs of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. It's an agenda for the people of this country. It's focusing on driving down the cost of health care, driving down the cost of prescription drugs, protecting coverage for pre-existing condition, raising family incomes by rebuilding our country with a serious infrastructure plan for our roads, bridges, ports, transit systems. Will create 16 million good-paying jobs, and taking on the corruption in Washington by getting money out of our political system. Those are issues Democrats ran on and won. That's our agenda. We're going to make good on those promises.
Well, it seems like getting money out of politics and the oversight has had the overwhelming sort of impact in terms of what he wants to do. But you just heard his agenda. Is that something you can work with, and do you think that you will be working on?
Look, I think that we are going to, do everything we can to see if there are areas where we can work in a bipartisan manner. But at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that we're protecting the country. And that means when you've got, radical proposals from the Democrats to slash our defense budget, to slash the size of our nuclear forces, when you've got members on their side of the aisle, Congressman Swalwell, suggesting that they're going to confiscate people's guns and that people shouldn't try to resist because the government has nuclear weapons. That's something that he's actually said. When you've got the Democrats protesting in each other's offices because you've got some on their side who think we should eliminate all fossil fuels in 10 years. That's just it's a recipe for disaster. And so we won't be part of that. We won't be party to it. We're going to fight every day to make sure that we preserve the tremendous momentum we've seen. And the Democrats have a challenge because the results are there. As I said, President Trump's deregulation, the work we've done in Congress on that, the tax cuts. We've got, historically low unemployment across the board, historic job growth and economic growth. And the American people did not vote to turn all that around.
Yeah.
So we are going to do everything we need to do to defend that.
I want to ask you about defense spending and these upcoming appropriations bills and how you see the priorities taking place. But you just said Democrats have challenges. The Republicans have challenges as well, particularly when you look at what just took place in the midterm elections. There's a lot of conversation about the suburban woman not supporting the GOP right now. I mean, if you were to look back 17 years when your father was the vice president of this country, does the GOP look the same today? How does it look different than 17 years ago?
No, I mean, look, I think all parties change and evolve. I think we clearly have work to do with respect to suburban women. There's no question. But I also think we need to be careful. A lot of what we saw in these midterms was massive amounts of money coming in, billionaires putting money in on the Democratic side, and frankly, Nancy Pelosi targeting Republican women. So when you have a situation where you've got somebody on the other side of the aisle saying that she stands for all women, but we very clearly saw her go after our Republican women. And I think that it's going to be very important for us to make sure that we get those seats back. We've got a great opportunity to get them back, and I intend to do that.
How do you do that? I mean, what is the secret sauce here to appealing to suburban women to come back to the GOP? I mean, this is a big problem going into the 2020 election.
Well, I think it's a couple of things, Maria. I think, first of all, the Democrats are going to be forced into a very radical set of policy proposals and agenda. You've already seen it. We talked about some of it. So number one, I think that what they're going to have to do to appeal to the socialist wing of their party will really help make clear the choice that people have. Secondly, I would say we as Republicans have got to do a better job at making sure that our message is getting out there. For women, the extent to which economic growth matters, the extent to which national security matters, the extent to which we've got to make sure people understand that, the Democrats were lying when they said we're going to take away coverage for pre-existing conditions. All of those things are very important, but we can't segment women into, thinking they only care about women's issues. That's
right.
Frankly what the Democrats do. We know women, moms all across this country want to make sure that our borders are secure. They want to make sure that our nation's secure. They want to make sure that their kids can get jobs when they get out of school, and that we've got the kind of economic growth that will make sure that happens.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when people ask me to speak about money and women, versus money and men, I say, look, thank you for the invitation, but that's basically marketing. We all want to make money. We want a good investment plan for the long term. What about the security end of this? You've got 2 appropriations bills that you need to deal with before year end. Otherwise, we could see a government shutdown. How real is that? And will we see defense spending numbers change?
Well, thankfully, Maria, we've already been able to pass the defense appropriations bill. The president signed it into law. The first time in, I think, over a decade that we passed it at the accurate or adequate levels and on time. We do have a number of other appropriations bills that we will have to address and deal with before December 7th. But on defense spending and on defense appropriations, that is absolutely something we've got to make sure. The president has made the investment with, Congress has appropriated money to begin to rebuild our military, but we have been in such a hole after the Obama administration. It is going to take multiple years to be able to do that effectively, and we simply cannot allow the Democrats to turn back on that. Our adversaries are in a position now where they are deploying weapon systems we simply can't defend against in too many instances. And the security of the nation long into the future depends that we make sure we continue to make those kinds of investments in our security and in our military, our men and women deserve.
What is the biggest risk, do you think, this country faces within the next 2 years regarding the president's economic agenda? Will the Democrats be able to reverse the president's business-friendly agenda?
I know that they will try, and I think that certainly the tax cuts have made a huge difference. I think that deregulation also, and you don't hear quite as much about that, but you know well that the kinds of deregulation we've seen, the extent to which the government has said, look, we're going to get out of the business of trying to interfere in every aspect of economic investment. We're going to let people keep more of what they earn. You know, for my home state of Wyoming, deregulation has been tremendous in terms of what we've been able to accomplish with revenue from, you know, oil and gas leases on public lands, our coal industry, our energy industry. So we're going to have to work very hard to make sure that business, that the engine of growth in this economy, our small businesses, continue to know that they've got the support of certainly the Republicans in Washington, and that we're going to block the Democrats from being able to reverse course on that.
All right, we will leave it there. Congresswoman, we'll be watching. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Maria.